Welcome to All In, a straight-shooting, science-based podcast about periods, fertility, and nurturing health outside of unrealistic beauty expectations. We will mostly, but not exclusively, focus on hypothalamic amenorrhea, HA, a component of the female athlete triad, and relative energy deficiency in sport.
I'm Dr. Nicola Rinaldi, scientist and lead author of the book No Period, Now What? I specialize in helping people understand how their eating, exercise, and lifestyle habits are keeping them from hormonal health and their best life. My work focuses on regaining periods, improving fertility, and breaking free of the rules of underlying diet culture.
My name is Florence Gillet. I'm a certified eating psychology coach and the founder of BeyondBodyImage.com. I specialize in mental recovery, helping people let go of toxic health beliefs to finally feel at ease in their bodies at any size.
Every 2 weeks, the All In podcast brings you real recovery stories, expert insights, and new scientific research on HA, hormonal health, and fertility, with an unmissable touch of body respect and women's empowerment.
Just a reminder that this podcast represents the opinions of the hosts and their guests. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. It is for informational purposes only. And because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Music by the Andy Shulman Band, available on Spotify. Hello, Nicola. It's really nice to be here again for this new episode. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Had a great weekend. And I'd really like to bring in our guest for today, Julie Duffy-Dillon. I'm super excited to have you on the podcast today, Julie. It's, I know we know each other's work in passing, but I'm really excited to really get into some of the nitty gritty of HA and PCOS with you. So thank you for coming on with us.
Thank you. Same here. I'm excited to talk to you. It's nice to actually meet you.
Definitely.
I felt like I already knew you, but now I really do. So
yes.
Thanks for asking me to come on.
So you might have understood now that this is a special episode on finding out really the differences and the similarities and why it's so important to really make the difference between HA and PCOS. So Julie, do you mind maybe introducing yourself and explaining a little bit what you do?
Sure. So I am a fat positive registered dietitian in the US, and I help people with PCOS to move away from diets, diet culture, and help if someone's also in eating disorder recovery, help people recover from an eating disorder, to promote health and advocate for better care. And I do that through, I used to work individually with clients for about 20 years, and I'm actually not working individually anymore, but I do train a lot of practitioners to do the same. And I also have courses for people with PCOS. And the way that I kind of got into it had a lot to do with working with people in eating disorder recovery, and I didn't really want to work with any other medical conditions anymore. I really was just digging food behavior stuff and wanted to help people recover. But people with PCOS just kind of kept coming to me. And 20 years ago, I was at the very beginning of my anti-diet professional kind of experience. And so I knew that I didn't want to help people diet anymore. And I certainly wasn't going to measure their success with a scale. So
yay.
PCOS. So I was like, well, that doesn't work for most people. So why would I do that with people with PCOS? So it just sent me down a path of trying to figure out some different ways. And that's what I feel like now that's what all I do is really helping people with PCOS. And yeah, so it's a fun thing. Another thing that I also do, I probably should mention, is I also have a podcast called Love Food, since I'm talking to some other podcast listeners. Love Food is a podcast for people with a complicated relationship with food, whether they have PCOS or not, and help to just rewrite their experience with food. So yeah, that's me.
That's great. And I think that answered my first question without even asking. See, I told you, we're just starting here. So, we have to kind of get used to this. Now, I think, Nicola, you wanted to discuss a little bit the kind of classic criteria of PCOS.
So, as far as PCOS goes, the classic criteria for diagnosis are 2 out of 3 of, sort of missing or irregular periods, polycystic ovaries, and hyperandrogenism, either physical manifestations or biochemical, so blood work that shows hyperandrogenism. So in your experience, Julie, how is PCOS manifesting in real life people? Because, that's all in the scientific literature, but that's not necessarily how people experience it in their own lives. What are the typical manifestations that you see?
So, most people that I've talked to have struggled with um, their body in some way. Maybe it's having these irregular periods or infertility, and gone to the doctor because just something wasn't right, but not really been able to figure out what it was. And at the same time, experiencing kind of a dismissal at the doctor's office with like, oh, you just need to lose weight. People with PCOS can come in every shape and size, of course. And it's a condition that a lot of times people at higher weights are told like that's kind of the cause of it or to the blame, or if you just fix it, then whatever you're experiencing, whether it's, mood swings or infertility or hair on your face, acne, whatever. But then as people kind of pursue more information and, I feel like maybe over the last 5 years or so, PCOS has got, more people's attention. So doctors are diagnosing it a little bit more frequently. But for the most part, people that I talk to, they will find out they have it almost kind of like in passing, or a doctor will be like, oh yeah, last year I put in your chart that you had PCOS, and like they already
Nice.
told that they have it. And getting that information, I think it's really powerful to like know what's going on in your body. I mean,
Yeah,
it's crazy,
duh.
but I like to know. But also the information people get is just kind of meh,
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, just make sure you diet, cut out this food group, lose weight, or just don't ever gain weight. And here's some birth control and come back when you're trying to get pregnant.
Yeah.
That's basically what I hear every single time.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if you've heard the same too.
The birth control Band-Aid is rife in the medical community. I mean, it seems like anytime somebody has period problems, it's here, take the birth control pill and it's going to fix everything without actually addressing the underlying cause.
And then it's like, by the time you want to have a baby, we'll fix it, right? But sometimes it can take ages for your body to kind of go back into a place where it can be fertile again. So I think it's just a bit, I would say, irresponsible in a way. It's just not
Yeah.
really looking into the real causes. And I mean, I was interested by what you said also, that people with PCOS come in all shapes and sizes, because this is something we tell a lot of women about HA as well. So it's interesting because also I think we hear a lot sometimes the term lean PCOS, as if, PCOS would be by nature for people in a larger body, which to me, like, it's just tainted with weight stigma all over. But what is your experience of that? And would you say that there is a kind of lean and non-lean or whatever? Or, I mean, is it all the same, right? What you're saying?
Yeah, I don't like the word or phrase lean PCOS. And sometimes I have a hard time like articulating why, but it irritates me. One, because a lot of times when people get medical care, they've never met their healthcare provider before. And so the healthcare provider is just judging by that moment and the body size in that moment. And what I've learned over the last 20 years working with people with PCOS is that people will diet. And when I say diet, I mean really cut out significant amounts of foods, food groups, calories. Even though people's weights aren't always going down, people are really trying hard.
Mhm.
And so sometimes it eventually does. And so when a doctor is like, oh, you must have the lean PCOS because you're not in a larger body, I'm like, how do you know what they've been doing? Have you even
Yeah.
asked how they're eating or what their body shape has changed? And even so, people being in a smaller body, it would be just applauded anyway if someone was at a higher weight at some point. But the different kind of experiences with PCOS because of different criteria. I know there's people who have don't have the higher androgens as a part of their diagnostic criteria. And, I'm definitely not someone who is like a pathologist or, diagnostician, if that's the right way to say it. But I often wonder about that type of PCOS, if that's where the overlap of HA comes in, and may really be the misdiagnosis of PCOS. I'm not an expert in that area, but that's my gut. And I don't see a tremendous amount of people in that spot. And I would assume, Nicola, that's where you see a lot of people.
Yeah. Yep.
And the majority of people that I have worked with over the years with PCOS, they have met all three criteria. And they have really high circulating insulin levels as well. And so that's the majority of people that I've worked with. And I know that's not needed to have the diagnosis. You don't have to have all three, but honestly, most people I've worked with have had all three. So
yeah, that's really interesting, because for my work, the misdiagnosis does come in with people who have the amenorrhea, and then on ultrasound they're told they have polycystic ovaries, although the actual criteria are not necessarily followed. It's just like somebody looks at the ovaries and like, oh, there's a lot of follicles, it's polycystic ovaries, and therefore you have polycystic ovarian syndrome. So there's actually a chapter in my book called HA versus PCOS that I have freely available for download at noperiod.info/HA vs PCOS, because I think it is so important for people to get the right diagnosis. So it sounds like that's not something that you see, but I think the reason that the diagnosis is so important has to do with the sort of recommendations for recovery. So if you have HA, the recommendations are very much to increase fueling, so increase food, eat all of the food groups, cut out high intensity exercise. And in the sort of classic response to when somebody has PCOS, they're told basically the opposite, like go cut carbs, eat as little as possible, exercise as much as you possibly can, and that's going to make all your PCOS symptoms go away. So I know that that is not what you believe or not how you treat people. So would love to hear more about what your recommendations really are, and if you do think that there should be a difference in the recommendations for the two, or if they're really more similar.
I think it would depend, but I want to say one thing about the intersection of HA and PCOS and my experience with it. When I was seeing clients individually, people recovering from an eating disorder sometimes would get diagnosed with PCOS. And after a few times kind of flubbing around with it, realizing like, people really need to wait probably a good year after whatever their recovery is going to look like physically, having enough food for a year, their body has recovered. And sometimes people use the word or the phrase weight restored. If someone gets the diagnosis and they're still kind of like trying to recover, I'm like, let's just wait a little bit and see how your body responds to this. And so that's where I often would see it. And then after a good year or so, then it would just be more clear that, no, it was HA and it's PCOS. Yeah.
Our hormones do tend to do some weird things as we're recovering from dieting and over-exercising. And so I definitely agree with giving it a longer time than, not getting blood work done immediately and then going down another rabbit hole, but kind of giving your body some time to recuperate and settle into a more, normal pattern for you, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah. And, I know you asked too, like how the recommendations differ, or just like what the traditional recommendations are for PCOS and how mine are different. And I was thinking about, someone with HA getting misdiagnosed with PCOS. And, oftentimes the recommendations are like, let's get you on an insulin sensitizer like metformin. And one of the first things that people will tell me that kind of gives me this is what kind of gave me the clue that people needed to wait a little bit before they actually recovered and their body was like healing before we said, oh yeah, it definitely is PCOS, is they would feel so awful on metformin. And I know metformin feels awful in the GI tract. For those of you who are on it, you're like, I already felt a little awful. But besides the GI tract stuff, when my clients with PCOS start, some kind of tool that helps lower insulin levels, after their GI tract symptoms go away, they feel great. Like they feel so much better. And my clients who had this kind of like, we're not really sure what it is, they did not feel better. It did not seem to improve. I don't know if you've seen that either, but that was another kind of way that I was like, I think I just need to help people pause before we decide. So anyway, wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that's really helpful to hear, because people are often put on metformin, and I don't really know. It's sort of like, well, it's not going to help your HA recovery. Is it going to hurt? It might, because of the GI symptoms. But hearing that people that don't necessarily have true PCOS don't actually feel any better afterwards, that's really helpful to hear.
Yeah, like their insulin levels don't need to be, they don't need a sensitizer.
Right. Right.
So, yeah. So I know I've been like skirting around that question you originally asked me, like
That's okay.
the general recommendations for PCOS treatment, and especially when it relates to food and stuff. And I'm happy to jump into there now if this is a good time for it.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. I mean, one thing I wanted to add about what you said in terms of waiting for a full year, I think it's really, really important to repeat that to whoever is listening to us, because what I find is that, so, we have a support group for women in recovery from HA, but then typically when they get their periods back and after they get 3 cycles, they get into like another group that is kind of more like life after HA, where they can keep going and see what happens and all of that. And what we see is sometimes they get their period back, but then they freak out because something else is happening and they start showing different symptoms that they're not too sure about, but it's just part of their recovery journey. And the problem is if they freak out immediately and maybe, they will have gained weight, potentially more than what they had hoped for. And then they will go to their doctor and the doctor is going to freak out as well and say like, of course you gained weight. Now this is PCOS showing, right? Then they get into this whole narrative that kind of reinforces the idea that if they had dieted, if they had kept dieting, that they would not be in this situation. Yeah. And so it's reinforcing for me like the mental side of the eating disorder, which is like, see, you lost control and you gave in, and you just ate all the foods and now your hormones are all over the place. So I think it's really key for women listening to us that might have been a bit longer in this process to also let themselves give the time that their body needs to feel like it's back into balance. And I know we discussed this before with Nicola on some of the other episodes where we say it takes time for these hormones to come back into balance. And when we tell women you need to have 3 recovery cycles to be like on your way to be fully recovered, it's because it takes time for all these hormones to settle. So I'm really glad that you said that, because I feel like we battle with this quite a bit, where women kind of freak out. And I totally understand, like it's a lot to take on and that recovery is not easy to go through, but it's really having that patience and having that grace for their own bodies as well. Saying like, if I, maybe underate and over exercise for 10 years, well, yeah, it's going to take probably a little bit of time to come back to normal.
Yeah. And I think too, that just highlights how problematic and harmful that fat phobia is, or, just having a fear of weight gain and, oh my gosh, oh wait, it is too much, how as healthcare providers, how it's so important for us to make sure we're examining that part of our own narrative and how weight gain is a wonderful sign of recovering. It's like how your body is helping to heal from all this. And I think if we were not as so scared of weight gain as a culture, then this would not be as hard for people to distinguish.
Absolutely.
I would think it would be much easier. And I don't know, there would be a lot less a lot less of a lot of things. I can't even list them all. There's so many things.
And I feel like it starts to be a bit more prevalent, that we kind of hear more about with stigma, how it informs, how it has to also inform the care that we give, and how it cannot just be seen as this, oh, well, yeah, it's an annoying comment. No, it is something that really hurts people long term, that kills people because they don't get the care they require. But it's also because of that some women do not get the support they need in recovery because they keep being told they're normal size, right? Yeah. And so it participates in so many of these different ways. So that's something I just wanted to add, because I find that it's so important. And then, now if you can tell us a little bit more about what's your way of working with patients that have PCOS and how you support them in feeling better, because at the end of the day, that's what we try to do, right?
Yes. Yeah, because I don't necessarily want people to just jump through all the hoops. Like, I actually want people to feel better, and
Mm-hmm.
whatever that's going to look like for them. And, we know that most healthcare providers are recommending people to lose weight or, make sure they don't gain too much weight with PCOS. We know that there's recommendations to cut out carbs and or sugar, and pretty intense diet recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in the same breath of like, even though the evidence doesn't support these recommendations, there was a 2018 evidence-based guidelines that were released for PCOS. And one of the big parts of the diet section was basically like, oh yeah, we have no diet to recommend that actually helps most people with PCOS to improve health. So then it goes on to say, so just pick one. Which
Great.
isn't that
How
horrible?
about come up with a different paradigm instead?
Like 3,000 people were part of this this evidence-based guideline that was like supposed to be so comprehensive and important. And yeah, so just
I'll
pick
have to go
one.
find that and read it. Yeah, that
I
sounds.
can send you the link.
Yeah,
It's
send us the link. We'll put it in the notes.
Yeah, it's helpful to read. And the thing that was really great to see in this was the talk about body image and eating disorders, mood disorders, talking about diabetes and PCOS. And there's tons of weight centric kind of paradigm within it, of course. And there's also like this conflicting, like, oh, weight has nothing to do with why people with PCOS get gestational diabetes.
Mhm.
Weight has nothing to do with why people with PCOS get prediabetes or diabetes. It just is like, it's just part of how how it's mapped out and how it works. But yet at the same time, there's tons of like, but we need to still help people lose weight because of the O word problem. And so anyway, that's basically what I just want to say for listeners with PCOS who already know this, but like, I know that's what you're hearing and what you're getting. And also when going to the doctor, it's a lot of just, I don't care why you're here, but let's talk about your weight and what have you done
Mm.
to lose weight. And of course, here's your birth control. So what I found is that when I would see people with PCOS as a dietitian specializing in eating disorders, most people were coming in with these really intense carb cravings, and they would describe themselves as food addicts and binge
Mhm.
eating or compulsively eating or overeating or some kind of word associated with like that. And as I like peeled back some of the layers and found out how people were eating, most of my clients with PCOS were restricting tremendously. And
Mhm.
I'm not going to name like calorie amounts or anything, but just know it was like less than we would tell like toddlers to eat.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just one person, but I've like hundreds of people have said the same thing. Like, my doctor is recommending me to limit my calorie intake to XYZ, but I'm only eating X and Y.
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
um, and just how frustrating that must be as a patient to be told like, okay, obviously you need to eat less, this amount, and they're eating a lot less than that. And so when I found out that people were restricting so much and either having this relationship with exercise that felt like torture and punishment, and they still did it anyway, or just had no energy at all to exercise. Finding ways to make sure people just like heal the relationship with food, eating an amount that's like adult amount of food was
Mhm.
all that was my first really that's my first goal with anybody that I work with is like, I want you to be able to like have a normal relationship with food where you can live your life. And I think people with PCOS should too. And what I
Yep.
noticed is people were starting to just recover from their eating disorder or just diet culture in general. They started to feel better. Like, oh, like I can tell my cravings are not as intense. Like they're still
Mhm.
there. And I think PCOS cravings for carbs are different than people without PCOS. And I should mention too, I don't have PCOS. And so I feel really grateful that people have helped me to appreciate the lived experience of it. But I have to name, I'm never going to really understand it.
Mhm.
But the way people talk about carb cravings, while they're getting enough food with PCOS, there's still something to it. But when a person was just so malnourished or not eating enough, they were constant all the time. And so as I kind of dug into it a little bit more and got some more training, I found if people with PCOS are eating enough food for them, whatever that is,
Mhm.
working with a dietitian is one of the best ways to really be able to figure that part out. But it's like, eating at least 3 meals a day and having some snacks and not cutting out food groups.
Yep.
And along with that, having probably also more protein with that. Not taking out anything else, but it just seems like people with PCOS probably need more protein. I don't know if it's because of the high circulating insulin or the hormonal imbalance just being exhausting on the body or what. But my clients have told me that having more protein throughout the day, again, not eliminating carbs and fat,
Yep.
very important, just having more protein with it, that they felt like, oh yeah, I'm like not as sleepy by 2 o'clock, or my cravings feel a little bit more manageable. And then another side of that, but as people are starting to eat enough for them, and then, experimenting with strategically placing protein in more often, also then making sure they're getting enough rest. And for people with PCOS, what they've told me is that they're really good at doing things for everybody else. And um, and really burning themselves out and having a hard time enforcing boundaries. And that boundaries may be with work, it may be with family life. It also may be just making sure that they have like good self-care with like sleep, like routines, things like that. So helping people then to also get enough rest. So eating more and resting more are like the complete opposite, I think, than what most people are told that they should be doing.
Yes.
But that's the first two things that I want people to do. And exercise is something that people often will bring up right away. And I'm like, no, your body needs to rest. Like you've been through a lot. Like let's help your body just gather like what it needs to heal. And after a few months of eating more frequently and enough food and resting more, that's usually when clients come in and they're like, I have this weird feeling. I kind of want to move my body. And I don't know what that's about. And there's lots of shame, of course, for my clients who were told that their body was not acceptable. Because it either was too large or for whatever reason, not having a really comfortable relationship with exercise. Or the flip side of it, having a relationship with exercise that was very like punitive and like, oh, I have to exercise in order to be able to eat. And there was lots of over exercise. And so wanting to have that balance of like, okay, I want to move because it's going to feel good, but I don't know how I'm going to do that without like flipping a switch. And so being really gentle with that, whether it's just experimenting with different movement that is pleasurable and brings you joy and helps you feel the way you want to feel. And honestly, the type of exercise totally depends on the person. I just always want to make sure people are eating enough to support it.
Yep.
There's certainly people with PCOS that run a really fast marathon, but they need to eat a whole lot more in order to support that kind of training. And for the most part, though, most people that I've worked with find some kind of movement, again, once they're eating enough, that feels like a lower intensity kind of movement. Maybe it's walking or swimming or dancing or just something that's like a lower kind of intensity that they can do pretty frequently. I don't mean like every day, but just, kind of a consistent, like, because it feels good. I enjoy it. I get to go walk with my neighbor or something like that, some kind of enjoyable thing. And again, some people with PCOS end up liking this high intensity stuff, but most I find it just doesn't feel good. So I don't know if you found anything different, but along with all of that, with so eating enough, rest, movement, another piece of it is also like finding tools for you that helps lower insulin levels. Now, not everyone with PCOS has high circulating insulin, but I've seen studies of like 75 to 95% of people have high insulin levels. And that's the part that can make people feel exhausted and have the cravings and have really poor sleep. So that's where sometimes people go on metformin from their doctor. That's an insulin sensitizer, or they may experiment with an inositol supplement, something that may help with it. And there's of course other supplements too that a healthcare provider could help you with. But finding a tool that helps lower it. And I know the insulin piece is like a big part of why diet culture is just so hooked into PCOS.
Totally.
Insulin is it's like a growth hormone. It's something that makes people gain weight. And helping people to actually sustainably find ways to lower insulin long term, I think is the key. Because sure, like cutting out carbs or sugar or exercising more, that may help for a few weeks to a few months, but research doesn't support that long term that it's going to help for most people. And same with people with PCOS. Like it's not something that we have actually seen long term data to support it. And instead, doing these other things where letting your body, as much as you can, be in your body to give you the feedback of like, yeah, this feels good. No, this does not. And for some people, again, it ends up being medication or supplements or a combination of all of those, along with eating enough to help treat those insulin levels. That, in a nutshell, is kind of the way I do it. And I know it is like totally on the opposite end of what mainstream healthcare workers are doing at this point, but whatever.
Well, it's fascinating to me because those are very similar to the recommendations that we give for recovering from HA. It's basically fuel your body, eat all of the different types of macronutrients because your body needs all of those. Let yourself have some rest. I mean, it's like the same thing, actually. So I think one of the things I find really interesting about what you said is that the fear of diabetes, I think, permeates so much of what we're told in terms of, don't eat carbs, don't eat sugar. It's going to cause diabetes. It's going to increase your insulin levels. It's going to increase your HB1AC, all of that. So I think it's really interesting that you say that you don't see that sort of eating all the foods as playing a role in that. And rather just using individual tools to kind of support decreasing insulin. So there's this sort of idea out there that the way you eat could cause PCOS. Like, what do you see as the real etiology of where it comes from? I mean, is it genetics? Is it something to do with lifestyle? What do you think there?
So I'm so glad you asked. And I also want to include diabetes with that and PCOS too, because I do think diabetes is used as a weapon and PCOS management as a fear tactic to make people get in line, follow my orders or you're going to get diabetes. And what we know about PCOS and diabetes is they're still mostly genetic. Like they're still like passed down through families. And so what a person eats or what a person weighs is not a cause for these things. And I wish more people with PCOS knew that and heard that, you didn't cause the PCOS, you didn't eat the wrong thing or gain too much weight. This is something that was passed down through your family. And for, talking about ovaries, I think about 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, people were not talking as much about like menstrual cycles and bleeding and ovaries. So I would imagine that information, if someone was diagnosed with PCOS in the family, it wasn't really discussed because it was like, shh, and then,
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of my clients will be like, oh yeah, on my dad's side, all his sisters weren't able to have children. And so, or things like that will pop up to give us an idea of like, oh yeah, like that probably was something that's been in your family. Same with like a family history of diabetes. That's still like the strongest predictor for this to happen for someone. So, there's things that you can do to manage and feel good in your body and manage your health. And it still may not be enough to prevent diabetes. Like that's something that we need to make sure that we're clear about and not, again, using diabetes as this weapon just to make people like cut out food groups and to weigh less when that in the end is not going to be something that's going to prevent it anyway. And putting them at risk for other dangerous experiences like eating disorders. And what I know with PCOS is weight cycling or that yo-yo dieting experience that most people who diet experience because diets aren't sustainable. But weight cycling is a predictor for binge eating and binge eating disorder in PCOS. So, I think about how we really need to make sure we help people with PCOS to like learn skills to prevent weight cycling. That's a really big part of the work I do with clients is like, how can we help you prevent weight cycling? And I would assume that's similar with HA. Like, how can we help you prevent like restriction and make sure you get enough rest to keep this like long term? And yeah, I have a feeling that because people with PCOS are so forced to diet, that the beginning stages of PCOS and and what you recommend and what I recommend with PCOS are so similar. And I wonder how they'd be different if there wasn't so much push for weight loss in PCOS. They may look different in the beginning, but I mean, there's probably been maybe as many people on this hand that I haven't had to like say, no, you need to eat more than that, but every once in a while it would happen, but not very often, and probably similar to HA, or someone, oops, I'm not getting a period. Like maybe every once in a while it happens like that, but really, because of how everyone's just pushed to limit how much they're eating, we all have to like do that first to help people get enough.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle, because if we were not living in diet culture and thinness was not constantly pushed to us as the only way to success and happiness and health, then, we would not end up in those difficult situations where we end up dieting, and we would not end up in conditions like HA, for example. And it all participates in actually getting us worse. And it all participates in also this idea that food is going to solve everything, or it's going to cause all your problems. Mm-hmm. So it's the same with, all the campaigns for reducing the O word, right? And you keep hearing it's because people don't eat well. It's because they don't, choose the right foods, or they eat too much of it, or whatever. Or it's the food industry that's creating lots of empty foods or whatever. But you kind of forget that there are so many factors at play. And as you said, like genetic is obviously a huge one, which none of us can't really control in any way, shape or form. And then, there's your environment. If you lived in poverty, what kind of trauma you've been through. Have you been discriminated for your size? And I find that really, really interesting. That's why we wanted to have you on, is because you have this knowledge of like your weight shouldn't be considered in this whole situation. But the reality is it informs where you get down the line and how badly you can feel, because you've been trying to do all those things to lose weight. And obviously it's unsustainable, whether you have PCOS or not.
Right.
So, whether you do it for, getting into a smaller size dress, or whether you do it for health, it just doesn't work. So, so I think
your body doesn't know the difference, right? Yeah, and I think about too, so many people that I've worked with, they'll find me online and they'll say, "Oh, I haven't seen a doctor in like 10 years," and I'm like, "Why not?" And of course, it's because of the stigma that they experience, the shame of going to the doctor and just being told the same thing again. And healthcare avoidance is a really big deal in PCOS, and I think about how that leads to the progression of diabetes more than
totally
eating too much of whatever, or weighing too much or something like that. Like those, like healthcare avoidance and weight cycling, those are the things that I really think are going to make the biggest impact to help people with PCOS to manage their health more sustainably and to feel better, and to do things like help with fertility and any other kind of symptoms that they're experiencing with their PCOS.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I think, as Nicola said, it's really interesting that those recommendations are very, very close to the one that we give as the all-in approach. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the times, and maybe Nicola, you want to kind of continue on that note, we say like, if you end up having the two conditions, which can happen sometimes, right? You want to first solve your HA, and then you will look down the line if you still show those same issues after a while. But the reality is, when you explain how you work, Julie, to me, it looks like basically you would take care of yourself, and it would be the same for both conditions. What do you think about that, Nicola?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it sounds like really the difference would be in somebody that has HA and PCOS. It would really be about managing your insulin after recovery and sort of finding tools that work for you for that perspective.
Yeah.
And I know that many of them also lead to decreased androgens, and so decreases in some of the symptoms of hyperandrogenism that are experienced. And it sounds like from your experience, Julie, that using some of those insulin sensitizing agents can just help with overall well-being and feeling better in your body as well. So it seems like that's really the only place where there would be sort of an extra step to take.
Yeah, that's what I would see too, is having something to help manage insulin levels and androgen levels. Like if someone's on an inositol supplement or they're taking metformin, how that would help overall. And, what that ends up doing for people with PCOS also contributes to helping their mood. Many people with PCOS have a mood disorder. Of course, helps with ovulation then, it helps with just their sleep. A lot of people with PCOS also have a sleep disorder, so it contributes to like help with all those things. But yeah, and it's funny how they are so similar. And really just adding that extra little piece on there is all you would really need to do. And I wonder, again, I'm still like, I haven't really thought about this, but like if weight centric care wasn't just such a big push, that probably is all people with PCOS would need to do, period. Like that's it. Which is kind of sad to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, it'd be so much easier for people. They wouldn't have to go through all this torture in order to figure out what helps them.
Yeah.
Hopefully one day, right?
Yes, one day.
You did talk about some of the criteria for diagnosis, and you said that most people you saw, they had the kind of 3 manifestations that would be put down as PCOS. Is there anything else that sometimes can be showing up that you see, or symptoms?
Yeah. Metabolic syndrome type stuff, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and then mood disorders. Those are all things that I see kind of tacked on often in there, especially with that group of people that has all 3 criteria.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really interesting. Those with HA often also have high cholesterol, and I think it's related to not having menstrual cycles, because cholesterol is a building block for estradiol and progesterone. And so if those are not being used on a regular basis, if the cholesterol is not being used as a building block, then, maybe it just doesn't really have another place to go. And so it kind of accumulates more.
This is where I could listen to you talk about all that. That's not my strong suit. I'm like, I can do food behavior all day long, but when we get into the nitty gritty of like all the different equations and like the chemical, reactions and things, that is something that is really interesting. So are you thinking that that's also what's happening with PCOS? That's why the cholesterol.
It could be. It would actually be really interesting to sort of find out if there's a difference in hypercholesterolemia in those who are not getting a period at all versus those who do have occasional periods. And, I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah. And the obvious like medical response was, well, of course, people who are not getting a period because of HA who are thinner, that would be the assumption. That's going to be a different reason than people at a higher weight. Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah. And again, of course, the response from many doctors is, oh, well, you need to eat better and exercise more to lower your cholesterol. Yeah. And really, that's not something that's, it's like, I've had people say to me, I really couldn't eat, I couldn't eat cleaner than I am. Like,
right.
I'm not eating any, yeah. So
that's a really big deal in the PCOS world too. Like, so many of my clients that I've worked with have told me that, they were eating so many fruits and vegetables or so many of whatever, or following whatever diet for years, and it still wasn't enough for their healthcare provider. And just, they basically were like, I know they don't believe me.
Yeah.
They don't think I'm actually following it, which is so sad. And yeah, anyway.
Yeah,
totally. So if anybody doing research is listening to this, maybe we're here. You can contact us.
Give us a call. We want to talk.
Yep.
But yeah. So yeah, I think it might be time for the last question that we usually ask on the podcast. Nicola, do you want to ask it?
Sure. So you probably know that in the book No Period Now What, we recommend all in as a path to recovery. But we find that sort of that idea of going all in, really maybe throwing caution to the wind and jumping right into something can really benefit us in so many other ways. So we'd love to know if there's a way that you are all in on something in your life, something new that you're working on or anything like that.
A few things come to mind, but one is I'm all in with being present. I'm trying really, especially during COVID kind of lockdowns and virtual schooling at home and everyone at home all the time. I found myself in the beginning just wanting to escape, but now I'm like, I'm trying to be more present.
I love that.
And, I'm also becoming more comfortable with my voice. It's something that I think I was socialized to not be okay with speaking up, or I didn't want to come across as like a gossip or catty, but I'm kind of like, screw that. If I see an injustice, I'm going to say something now. So what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
that is definitely all in, like we imagine it to be. So that's a great answer, because that's definitely what we try to do as well, right?
Yeah. Still learning and not, and just, like, I don't know if it's just coming with age, but I'm like, I don't care. If I see an injustice, I'm going to say something now. So
yeah,
that's great.
I feel so much wiser in my 40s than I did when I was younger.
Yeah.
It's actually a beautiful place to be.
It is. I agree.
And I find that it's funny because I just turned 40 last week.
Welcome.
Thank you. Very exciting to be there with you. And it's weird because I find that, so many of my friends were like, how are you? Is this okay? Like, how do you feel? And I was like, I feel great. Like, I feel awesome. And in a way, like, I was pondering on the fact that after 40, it's like women become invisible, right? We're not very represented in the media. If we are represented, we're represented in that way that is completely unrealistic.
Yes, no wrinkles, no gray hair.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a 40-year-old that has like, the waist of a 15-year-old or something like that. And anyway, I just thinking that in a way, being invisible is maybe what makes me more free as well. And that it kind of liberates us in a way from this constant pressure to look a certain way. So I think that's why I'm kind of looking forward to aging in that way. At least.
Good point. Yeah. I don't know if you all have read the book called Dietland, but it's a fiction novel, but it has a main character who's a fat woman who's trying to figure out, like, she basically has gotten to the place of like diet rock bottom and trying to figure out who she is. And that's one of the themes in the end is when we become invisible, it does have some power to it.
Totally.
And when you don't have to perform anymore, there's power in it. There's also, a dismissal. So we need to speak up more, but also that, like you said, highly recommend it. It's a good book.
That's great. We'll put link to that and read it for sure. And I think it's interesting because, as you said, like the more we maybe are less asked to perform in a certain way or be quiet and, good looking and just sitting there nicely, we're able to also say, hang on a minute, I don't like this. I'm going to speak up and I'm going to just, change things in my community maybe, or I'm just not going to stay silent at least. Very interesting way to be all in. I like it a lot, Julie. Brownie points. Could you also tell us where people can find you? I know you said you were not seeing clients anymore, but where do people find your courses? And obviously we'll link to all of that and your podcast.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So the best way to get connected with anything that I do is on my website. It's juliedillonrd.com. And you'll get connected to my podcast there, to my courses. I also do a non-diet PCOS community with Laura Burns. She is a yoga teacher and has PCOS, and that community has been really amazing. It's basically people who are wanting to live their life without diets and looking for community with their PCOS. because so much of like the online community world in PCOS is about either weight loss or symptom shaming. And this is like this is designed to be completely different. So that can be found at PCOSbodyliberation.com.
That sounds amazing. I think one of the really helpful parts about the community, there's also a community that's kind of grown up around my book as well. And having that connection with other people who are in a similar place in terms of wanting to step out of diet culture and be supported in that is, I think that's fantastic, because it's not something that is widely available at this point.
No, definitely not. And that way you don't have to like explain yourself why you're not doing whatever diet is popular right now, and you can just jump right in and have experience community.
Yeah, that support is really priceless for sure. So thank you so much, Julie. It was really interesting, and I'm really glad we had you on. I think it just covered so many of the topics that we sometimes struggle with, right? Like, where does this start? Where does it end? Like, who's responsible? Is it really all dieting? It is.
It is. And it's messy and not always clear, but sometimes just waiting and letting your body recover, and maybe it'll be more clear.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with us, and we hope to maybe have you on some other time as well.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you so much, Julie. All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Maybe take a few minutes to reflect on it and how you have been all in this past week. It always strikes me how different each person's all-in journey is. As I often say, there are many paths to HA and many paths out of it. Your journey is unique.
That is so true. And if you need more support on your journey, you should definitely start with No Period Now What, which you can get at noperiod.info/book.
And Florence and I both work with people on different aspects of period recovery and so much more. So if you'd like more personal advice and attention, you can go to noperiod.info/appointments to schedule a time to speak with me on fixing the issues underlying your missing periods and figuring out what those issues are.
And I'm at beyondbodyimage.com to work with me on the deeper emotional issues and your body image. I also run a French Instagram account, amenoré_fr. And obviously you can find Nicola at No Period Now What on Instagram. We also have joint clients, so you can access both our domains of expertise at the same time. If you enjoyed this podcast and found it helpful, please drop us a review to help more people find it.
Also, join the No Period Now What recovery support group at noperiod.info/support and let us know how All In is going for you.
All In is not just about period recovery, it's about getting your life back. See you in 2 weeks.
You were lost in fat loss till you got lost again. You were lost in fat loss. Now find yourself and then take all that you've learned about what love and loss, pleasure and pain. Never get lost again.